When I was 12, my parents dropped me off at a shelter. You cost too much. We'll be back when you're useful. They never came. A janitor named Miguel saw me crying and said, "You're coming home with me." 16 years later at my doctoral defense, I introduced him as my father. And when my real dad asked for a picture, I walked away. And they didn't cry. They didn't hesitate. They didn't even leave the engine running. My mother signed a form like she was picking up dry cleaning. My father stood next to her with his arms crossed. The woman at the front desk tried to act casual like this happened all the time. Then my mother looked at me and said it straight out. "You cost too much. We'll be back when you're useful." That was it. No hug. No goodbye. No explanation. They turned and walked out of the shelter like they were done with a chore. I was 12. I stood there for a minute thinking they were going to come back through the door. Maybe say it was a joke. Maybe say they didn't mean it. But the silence dragged on. One of the staff members tried to take my backpack from me and said she'd show me to my room. Like this was a hotel. They gave me a thin mattress, a scratchy blanket, and a drawer that smelled like old socks. The window didn't open and the heater made this constant clicking sound like it was trying to breathe. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't eat much. They called me Claire. I didn't correct them. That wasn't my name yet. Not really. My real name didn't matter anymore. At night I'd listen to the other kids whispering. Most of them had been there longer than me. Some were waiting for foster homes, others for someone to change their mind and come back. I was doing the second one. Every day I stared out the glass front door watching cars come and go. A week passed. Nothing. One night I was sitting in the hallway outside the rec room. It was past lights out. I was hugging my knees and trying not to cry because crying made it worse. That's when I heard a mop bucket squeak. A man in gray coveralls was pushing it slowly down the hall. He looked at me but didn't say anything right away. Just nodded like he saw kids sitting in hallways all the time. Eventually he said, "You know you're not supposed to be out here." I didn't respond. He leaned the mop against the wall and reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled granola bar and held it out like peace offering. I took it without speaking. He sat on the floor across from me and started talking about how his car got towed that morning. About how pigeons were nesting in the gym ceiling again. Dumb stuff. But I listened. His name was Miguel. He was the night janitor. He wasn't trained in child psychology. He didn't have any certificates or a counseling degree. But he showed up. Every night. And little by little I started waiting for that mop bucket sound. He didn't ask about my parents. He didn't push. But he noticed when I stopped eating, when I had trouble sleeping, when the other kids avoided me because of my asthma attacks or the weird rash on my hands from stress. One night I finally said it. They left me. He just nodded. Like he already knew. And then he said, "That's not what a parent does." A few nights later I saw him arguing with the shelter director. His voice was low but his face said everything. She kept shaking her head, flipping through a binder. Something about forms, background checks, income level. I didn't catch all of it. That same night he sat next to me in the cafeteria after dinner and said, "Pack your things." I stared at him. He said it again. "Pack your things." Thought he was joking. I thought he meant for the weekend or some field trip. But when I walked outside after lights out with my tiny duffel bag, he was waiting by his truck. No one stopped us. No alarms. No running security. Nothing. I climbed in. I had no idea what was about to happen. Miguel's truck smelled like lemon cleaner and fast food. The passenger door creaked when it closed and there was duct tape on the seat. I sat there gripping my bag like someone was going to yank me out any second. He didn't say much. Just drove. We didn't go far. Just outside the city limits, down a stretch of cracked road lined with broken fences and sagging mailboxes. He lived in a tiny beige house with a crooked porch and a patchy lawn, like it was holding itself together just to be polite. Inside it smelled like old coffee, pine sol, and something warm I couldn't name. Bobo, his ancient three-legged dog, came limping over and sniffed me like I was some weird animal Miguel had picked up off the road. Miguel didn't ask if I wanted anything. He just handed me a blanket and pointed to the couch. "This is yours now." That was the first time I felt it. That word. Yours. Like maybe I wasn't just something temporary anymore. The next few days were quiet. He went to work, left me food, came home tired but still asked me what I watched on TV or if Bobo behaved. I didn't go to school. I wasn't enrolled anywhere. We didn't talk about that part. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be there. No papers. No approval. No guardianship. He'd taken me without permission. But he didn't care. And neither did I. Eventually, a caseworker knocked on the door. I panicked. Hid in the bathroom, tried to hold my breath. She asked him if he'd seen a girl who ran away from the shelter. He just stared at her and said, "Nope. Just me and my dog here." She looked around, took notes and left. He didn't yell at me after. Just handed me a grilled cheese sandwich and said, "You want to stay, you stay. But I need you to try." Try what? I didn't know. At first I thought he meant to be normal. But I figured it out pretty fast. He meant try it life. We started homeschooling. He got a neighbor, Mrs. Ng, to help with math. He'd work nights, sleep a little during the day, and still drive me to the public library or sit through cheap science exhibits at the museum when we had coupons. He didn't have much, but whatever he had, he split it with me. One night I asked him why he did it. Why he took me. He said, "I was cleaning up and saw this kid sitting there like she was already gone. Like nobody had ever picked her. And I just thought, hell, maybe I could be the one to pick her." That was the first night I cried in front of him. The second knock on the door came 2 years later. It wasn't a caseworker. It was my mother. She stood there in a clean coat, hair perfect, acting like she'd come to pick up a package. She smiled and said, "Well, look at you, all grown up. Can I come in?" Miguel stepped in front of me and said she could talk from the porch. Then she said the words I knew were coming. "Your father and I have been thinking. It's time to come home." I didn't move. I hadn't seen her face in 2 years. And all she could say was time to come home, like this was some long sleepover that ran a little too long. I looked at Miguel. He didn't say a word. But I didn't need him to. I stepped back and closed the door. She pounded on it for a while, then left. That's when it started. After she left, I expected Miguel to say something. Maybe ask if I was okay or if I wanted to talk. But he didn't. He made dinner like normal. Eggs, rice, and hot sauce. He let me sit in silence. That was his way of giving space. Just being there without making a scene out of it. I couldn't stop thinking about her face. My mother. Perfect makeup, polished nails. Not a single sign that she had once abandoned her child in a government building and vanished without a word. I kept wondering why she came back. Why now? What changed? 2 days later, a letter showed up. No return address. Just a folded piece of paper inside. "Claire, we want to see you. You've grown into a fine young woman. We can help you now. We can fix this. Love, Mom and Dad. Fix this." Like I was some broken appliance they'd misplaced and now wanted back because they had the right tools. I didn't respond. But the visits kept coming. Every few months. A knock. A car parked across the street for hours. Sometimes a voicemail. They never apologized. They never admitted what they'd done. It was like they thought enough time had passed that the past didn't count anymore. They didn't know who I was becoming. By 16, I was finishing community college courses. Miguel found scholarships, free classes, online textbooks. I was obsessed. I studied like it would make me bulletproof. Like if I could be the smartest person in the room, maybe that would mean I wasn't discardable anymore. He never pushed, never bragged, never took credit. On my 18th birthday, he handed me a plain white envelope with court papers inside. Adoption finalized. I had no idea he'd been fighting for it behind the scenes. For years. Working extra shifts. Filing forms. Proving to people who never cared to ask why a janitor wanted custody of a girl with no record, no money, and no legal ties to him. Miguel wasn't my blood. But he was my father. Period. I started introducing myself as Claire Marquez. Felt right. I got into a research program on autoimmune disorders. Ironic considering how much of my childhood was shaped by doctor visits and medical bills. I threw myself into it. For a while, I almost forgot the other version of my life. The one that started with "you cost too much." Then, 6 months before my doctoral defense, I got an email. Subject, long time. There was no body text. Just a photo. Me giving a talk at a medical conference. And a message underneath. "We're so proud of you. Let's talk." Like he'd been watching from the shadows. Like I was a trophy they were waiting to collect once I shined enough. I showed it to Miguel. He said one sentence. "You don't owe anyone your peace." That line stayed with me. Then came the defense day. I stood at the podium in front of faculty, peers, researchers. Miguel sat in the front row in his one good suit, the same one he wore to court the day my name became his. I was about to start speaking when I saw them. My biological parents. Sitting in the back, clean and casual, smiling like they belonged there. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, when I introduced the people who shaped my journey, I looked straight at Miguel. I said, "There's only one person in this room who raised me, fed me, stayed when things got hard, and never once asked for anything in return. That's my father. And if I'm anything today, it's because of him." The room went quiet. Some people clapped. Miguel didn't move. After the ceremony, reporters asked for photos. I posed with my professors, my colleagues, and finally with Miguel. That's when my biological father came up behind me. He said, "What about a photo with your real dad?" I didn't even look at him. I just walked away. Then as I was turning the corner, I heard her voice. "My mother. So now you've forgotten the people who gave you life. That's selfish." I didn't stop walking. But those words stayed. They always did. The media coverage from the defense spread more than I expected. A couple of academic blogs picked it up. Then a local news station did a piece on the janitor who raised a doctor. It was cheesy but sweet. They called it a feel-good story. That's when it all really started. Suddenly, I was getting messages from relatives I didn't even remember. A cousin who once stole my birthday cake as a kid messaged me on Facebook asking if I wanted to reconnect. An aunt who had never reached out before sent me a link to a GoFundMe she made for her cat surgery, just in case you wanted to help. Then came the voicemail from my parents. My real ones. They said they wanted to meet. That it was important. That they had things to tell me. I deleted it. Miguel noticed the tension but didn't say much. He just told me we should celebrate. We ended up splitting a rotisserie chicken and watching a documentary about poisonous frogs. Classic us. But the celebration didn't last. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. This one I listened to. It was my mother's voice. She said she had cancer. Stage 4. It had spread. The doctors weren't hopeful. I sat in silence after the message ended. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything at all at first. Just this buzzing numbness that didn't go away. Then came the guilt. Like a cold hand reaching into my stomach and twisting. Miguel walked into the kitchen and paused when he saw my face. "She's dying," I said. He didn't ask who. He knew. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to do. I'd spent my whole life trying to erase them, trying to rewrite my story so they weren't part of it. And now she was dying. And she wanted to see me. I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. The next day I drove out to a hospice center in a neighboring town. I didn't tell anyone I was going, not even Miguel. I just needed to see for myself. She looked older than I expected. Smaller. Like someone had let the air out of her. Her hair was thin and her skin looked like paper. But her eyes were the same. But nervous. Always scanning. When she saw me, she started crying. I didn't. He said she was sorry. She said they were young, stupid, overwhelmed. That I had medical issues and they didn't know how to deal with them. That they didn't mean to leave me for good. They just thought someone else could do a better job. I asked her why they never came back. She didn't answer right away. Just stared at her hands. Then she whispered, "Because we were ashamed." She said they saw me in the news and realized what they'd missed. That they wanted to make it right. But it was too late. I told her I spent my entire life trying to earn their love. That every good grade, every certificate, every sleepless night of studying was me trying to become someone worth keeping. And they hadn't even been watching. She cried harder. Asked if I could forgive her. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to leave and never come back. But I stayed. Kept visiting. We talked about things we never had time for. I told her about my research, about Miguel, about the dog with one ear I adopted in college. She told me about her regrets. How my dad still couldn't talk about what they did out loud. The last time I saw her, she was holding my hand. She said, "You deserved more than we gave. You always did." And then she was gone. Just like that. The funeral was quiet. No church choir, no slideshow of childhood photos. There weren't many to show. Just a small room, a few distant relatives, and my father sitting in the front row, staring at the floor like if he looked up, the truth would punch him in the face. I stood in the back. I didn't speak. I wasn't asked to. After it ended, people offered him quiet condolences, some awkward hugs. He looked hollow. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, but I recognized that look. It was the same one he wore the day they left me. Except this time there was no one else to hand the damage to. I waited until the room cleared out. Then I walked up to him. He looked at me like he was scared I might disappear if he blinked. "She talked about you," he said. "Near the end. Every day." I nodded. He started to say more but stopped himself. Then finally asked, "Do you hate me?" I didn't answer. He said they were broke. That they couldn't handle the medical bills. That he was working 2 jobs and still they were drowning. That everything felt impossible and they chose wrong. I said, "You didn't just choose wrong. You chose to disappear." He didn't argue. Just kept looking down at his hands. We stood in silence for a while. Then he said, "I don't know how to live with what I did." I didn't say anything but I didn't walk away either. That was the first time I saw a crack in him. Not the stubborn, quiet man who turned his back on a child. Just a broken one who didn't know what to do with the weight of it all now that it had no place to go. In the weeks that followed he started calling. Not every day. Just enough that I noticed. He asked about my work, about Miguel, about my life. Not in a nosy way, just small pieces like he was learning to be human in front of me. At first I kept him at a distance. I told Miguel about the calls. He listened, then said, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. Just make sure it's yours, not theirs." I didn't answer right away. Then one day my father called and didn't ask for anything. He just wanted to tell me he bought a plant. A cactus. And that he hadn't killed it yet. It was the first time I heard him laugh. We didn't jump into some perfect father-daughter relationship. There were no birthday makeups or family dinners. It was more like pieces. Unfamiliar pieces slowly fitting into a frame we both kept at arm's length. But it was something. I didn't do it for him. I did it for her. For the apology she gave with her last breath. For the way she finally saw me in the end. And maybe a little bit I did it for myself. Because forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave them. It was the weight I stopped carrying alone. A year after the funeral I finished my postdoc. My biological father sent flowers. They were late and wilted with a note that said, "Still proud of you. Always was." I didn't respond. That night Miguel cooked my favorite dinner. Burnt rice with garlic chicken, and pretended like it wasn't a big deal. But I caught him standing outside later just staring at the stars. He did that sometimes, especially when things got quiet. I walked out and sat next to him. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that hallway?" He didn't look at me. Just said, "Yeah. All the time." "Think you would have done it again?" I asked. He turned his head like the answer was obvious. Every time. It hit me right then. Everything I'd built. My career, my future, the fact that I could breathe and feel and be something. I owed it all to a janitor who took a risk on a broken kid without a last name. So a month later, when the university invited me to give a talk for incoming students, I asked Miguel to come with me. He wore the same suit but this time with a new tie I bought him. Bright blue. Hideous. He wore it anyway. After the talk, during the Q&A, someone asked me who my biggest influence was. I didn't hesitate. I pointed to the man sitting in the front row and said, "That's my father. He saved my life." Everyone clapped. Some stood. Miguel just lowered his head like he always did when he didn't know what to do with that kind of attention. Afterwards, a photographer asked to take our picture. We were posing together when I saw someone behind the flash. My biological father. He was standing off to the side holding his phone like he was waiting for a turn that was never going to come. He stepped closer, raised his voice just enough to be heard. "Can I get a picture too? Just one. With my daughter." The air went cold for a second. I looked at him. Really looked at him. I remembered the shelter. The hallway. The words. "You cost too much." I remembered the silence. The absence. The years he spent doing nothing until there was something shiny to point at. Then I said quietly without anger, "No." I turned back to Miguel. Smiled. We took the photo. And I walked away. I didn't hear what my father said after. I didn't want to. That night I sat on the couch at home with Miguel and Bobo's replacement. Another rescue, this one blind in one eye, and watched old documentaries on mute. Miguel fell asleep halfway through. I sat there for a long time listening to the clock tick, thinking about everything I had and everything I'd lost. People say you only get one real set of parents. They're wrong. You get the ones who show up. And Miguel showed up. Every single day. He never asked me to call him Dad. So one night a few months later I just did. We were at a diner, arguing about whether or not I should take a teaching job in another state. He said I should go. I said I wasn't leaving him alone. He said, "You're not alone. You're just living." I said, "Okay, Dad." He stopped talking. He didn't look at me, just picked up his coffee and took a sip like nothing happened. But he smiled the whole way home. And he's still the only father I'll ever claim.